Welcome everyone. Just getting the event started a little early here, letting people join in. If y'all are having a good morning so far. Hey Todd, how's it going?
Going well, Justin. Hope everybody's doing good. We're getting set up here still. Justin, are we set up on the office hours chat?
Oh yes, we should probably get that guy public. There we go. Office hours chat should be open for you. Those users should be able to, if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in there. Or if you want to raise your hands, you can also always raise your hand, and we'll be happy to answer any questions as well. So just wait till the top of the hour here, and we'll get going. Good morning, Nazar. Or I guess evening for yourself. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Hi, Nazar. How are you?
Monitoring telemetry for a second day in a row. Everything looks good.
Great news.
Definitely seeing some more participation as the days tick on there as well. Alrighty. Looks like the top of the hour has hit, and we are good to get started. Do you want to take it away, Todd?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, taking the time. I know everybody's busy, but we are here, as always, to answer your questions. Office hours, we come here at the same time every other Wednesday to talk about all things Subspace. As we approach some exciting times, we have a lot going on. Today, of course, Justin is with me, as always, and we have Nazar with us today. Nazar is the co-founder of Subspace, and he leads the protocol engineering efforts. He and Jeremiah Wagstaff, of course, came up with the idea for Subspace after meeting on GitHub, of all places, if you can imagine that. So we're looking forward to hearing what Nazar has to say. But before we get to that, a couple quick housekeeping announcements. As always, Subspace is hiring. You can check out our website, subspace.network. Of course, keep on the Telegram, the Discord, the Twitter. All questions are best answered in our forum for support, which is at forum.subspace.network. Look for special announcements. And as we get going here, please, as always, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions at any time and you would like to speak. We also have the office hours chat. You can drop your questions in there in the Discord, and we will absolutely try to get to them. So again, back to Nazar. Today, he's joining us, and we're going to talk about our stress test, which launched yesterday. And thank you to all that are participating in that. That's a huge help for us. And of course, the upcoming Incentivized Testnet, our Gemini 2 initiative, and what we will be able to expect during these phases. So Nazar, thank you for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Alrighty. So obviously Nazar has been very busy, so I had a few questions that I thought we could ask him. Some of these are from the community, some of them are from myself, and what I would expect the community is curious to hear. But like Todd mentioned, feel free to throw any additional questions into the office hours chat if anything is not covered. So I guess the first thing I'd like to know, Nazar, is what can users expect from this stress test from a user experience level compared to maybe some of the previous versions that we've ran in the past?
Yeah, I think one of the most obvious changes is you should not end up on the rogue fork. I think everyone will be very excited about that, even though it's how it's supposed to be from the beginning. We have done a lot of testing, debugging, research about what may have caused that, and we did some improvements to our protocol and to Substrate. And together, all of that should result in everyone syncing on the same chain. And if we are going to the Substrate telemetry, Subspace telemetry right now, we can see that absolute majority of nodes are synced and they all are on the same fork, which is great to see. So that is the first obvious change. The other change is that the sync time should be faster. We have limited the max plot size this time to 100 gigabytes to drive more participation on the network. And as a result, we have possibility to make the blockchain history smaller. to achieve the full plot saturation, and that allowed us to decrease the size of the blockchain by about 10x. So the time to full sync should be way smaller. And I think it took from anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours for most people. So I think those are two biggest changes you can expect from this generation of the network.
Definitely, yeah. And I know we had some issues with the forks on those previous versions. I was actually just looking at the telemetry today. There's still even some other forks going on those versions, so it's definitely good to see that we were able to get those issues resolved.
Yeah, there are numerous reasons. It's quite fascinating that it worked at all at sometimes, but I think we have got all of them resolved.
Definitely, and I know you guys on the development team have been working tirelessly on that one for quite some time now, so we definitely appreciate all your work from the community side. One thing I was curious to know about is I know there's obviously also some in-depth work that's been going on as far as optimizations for like hard drives and SSDs go. And I know we had some interesting discussions had regarding SSDs versus hard drives. So what can users currently expect regarding the performance for those two comparable storage devices if they were to decide to run a farmer on this version?
Yeah. So first of all, even during Gemini 2, Gemini 1, Gemini 1B, we were doing quite a bit of optimizations around performance, especially on the hard drives, to make it more efficient, make it faster. And I think we've achieved some minor results. Like it's not 10 times faster, of course, but it was a steady improvement to recommitments and to other things. And I think all of that will be visible to a degree. However, because we limit the amount of space you can pledge this time, some of the features we've implemented before, like support for multiple disks, is not actually useful, and the software will just refuse to use more than one disk if you specify it that way. And also doesn't make a lot of sense because just 100 gigabyte per farmer, you should have that much space on pretty much any disk, even if you have like a laptop with a small SSD. You probably have 100 or 50 gigabytes lying around unused, and you can plot there. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is due to the small size of the blockchain, the disk requirements in terms of speed and random access are a little bit higher this time. The reason for that is that the amount of data that farmer has to rewrite on disk as the history gets bigger is basically you need to rewrite half of your plot every time the history doubles. And because our current network is relatively small, like 10% of what it was before at start, that means the doubling will happen sooner. The first doubling of the size will happen sooner. That means you'll have to rewrite pieces a little bit more often initially. And that will cause more strain on hard drives comparing to SSDs. But at the same time, the space is small, so it should be fine even on hard drives. But you can see that the sync time may be a little bit slower on the hard drive comparing to SSDs. Those are two like major things I can come up with right away.
And it's definitely a continuing challenge we'll continue to work through as far as those two different types of storage mediums, because they are just vastly different from a physical configuration format. But definitely helpful to have that insight. So something to keep in mind for those, for depending on which side of storage device you may be using.
Yeah, and also we have seen the results of the community poll that was made, and quite a few users were using SSDs. Some people were using hard drives. So if you have another kind of those polls, please participate. We are really interested in knowing what hardware and software people run, so we can optimize the protocol accordingly.
Definitely, and that we do still have that poll up in the announcements channel. I believe it's a couple announcements back there, but we would definitely be curious to hear anybody's feedback if you'd like to provide any additional information in there. Grateful to see that. So back to the stress test a little bit, and prior we did do a stress test in the prior versions, but then we had a little bit of a gap, and then went right into the incentivized testnet after that. Versus this this version, it seems like we're doing a little bit more of a linear flow with the stress test and then into the incentivized testnet. Can you provide some insight onto why we're kind of going that direction for this launch cycle?
Yeah, previous stress tests we had and Gemini 1 were quite far apart in terms of the time. So we were able to do a lot of changes to the protocol in the meantime. And that eventually meant that the stress test we were doing was physically quite a bit different from the actual network we were running. What we are trying to do this time is we are trying to prepare all of the changes upfront, and we want to make stress tests to be closer to actual Gemini 2, such that we can get like an idea of what that network will look like, and we like try to break the network right now. If you can, we will fix it before the actual Gemini 2 starts. That's the idea of a stress test, to put stress on the network in every way possible. But if everything goes well, that gives us a pretty good indication that the Gemini 2 incentivized part will also go well. And that's certainly what we want to achieve.
Definitely. Yeah, that was definitely one of the major takeaways with the major gap that we had there was, obviously you need to keep those two bundled together a little bit for them to be as effective as possible from a testing perspective. So definitely great to see. And luckily, it seems like we've been doing great so far, other than just a couple minor updates on the development side. We've been haven't had any major problems just yet. So any issues that you exactly any issues you do run across, anyone who's running, please let us know. We would definitely love to hear that feedback. And so on the stress test side of things, so what is your biggest hope in exactly what we are testing for? Is there anything in particular that we're expecting to break potentially? Anything in particular that we're hoping to really put stressors on? I know one of the bigger stress points in the last versions was like the syncing speeds and that large load of users all at once. So what's our focus in this case?
Yeah, we want to see if all of the issues that we've encountered previously and figured out are actually fixed, and that there are no new issues that people may have faced that we are not aware of. We also want to see how many participants can we sustain at this time. The previous stress test was actually double the size of the Gemini 1, and that was already, from what we understand, the record of any substrate-based chains in terms of number of nodes on the network. And we are certainly trying to break that record again ahead of our incentivized part and see what the behavior will be on the network. And yeah, that's the goal.
I have to shout out.
And we have, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have to shout out to you and Justin, Nazar. That the stress test yesterday went unbelievably well. I know you both worked really hard, and Justin in particular was absolutely running around yesterday. How many people do you know for a fact participated when in the stress test when it came on yesterday? We had a big launch party. Approximately how many people do you think joined?
I believe it was like 100 people, maybe even more. During the launch party itself, and then quickly afterwards we've got more and more people, and we have over 700 right now.
Wow, that's fantastic. Great job, you guys.
Of course, yeah. Most of the credit goes to the development team on their end with all of their amazing improvements. Saw about 300 nodes maybe come online within like the first 2 to 3 hours, which is definitely good to see. Especially with the weekday, many of our community members are busy people with busy lives, so I'm sure they were at work and things along those lines. So it was great to see that participation. All right. So one other, I guess my last question that I have for you, Nazar, on the stress test and incentivized testnet side, was there any other small improvements that you think will be noticeable for those users? I know the development team's been implementing some small improvements like fast sync and some memory optimizations and such. But would you be interested to shine a light on some of those?
I think most of those were minor and not very noticeable. There are memory changes both ways, actually. The biggest impact that anyone can notice, I think, is the solder commitment. The new implementation has some concurrency limits depending on number of disks that you are using. And it will ensure that even when one plot is recommitting, that plot and other plots can actually still solve in the meantime. So it will not like trash your disk to the point that you cannot even solve. So I think in that sense, you will be able to still get rewards even if recommitment is slowly happening on one plot, then the next plot. Like it will not try to recommit all plots at the same time, especially if you have like a bigger disk and you have a lot of them. So that will be the biggest improvement. You will not see the terminal output of your farmer getting supposedly stuck, like it's not printing anything. And you should still see the rewards from votes and block production going.
To hear. I know we did have some users with those issues, especially on some of the lower spec systems. So I'm sure they will definitely notice some of those improvements there. So that beyond the stress test, obviously, we still have many other development goals that we'll be kind of moving towards over these next few months and into next year. So I was kind of curious to ask some questions and get your insight on, I guess, moving forward, with the next few immediate months and next big milestones for the development team. One I was curious about is I know the development team has been working on a light client implementation, which I haven't seen too much of on the Substrate side of things. So I'd be curious to see if that would have any changes on the farming experience and what kind of experience that might be overall, if we have any insight into that just yet.
Yeah, so usually by light client, you can understand a few things. One kind of light client is actually the Polkadot.js. It's called Substrate Connect. Yeah, so that is like a client, like almost a node that can live in the browser and compile to WASM. That is essentially a light client. When we are talking about light client, we are talking about the node, like the farmer node, ability to join the network, but without syncing the whole history by processing all of the transactions. So that's part of what Justin mentioned just a few minutes ago about fast sync. That was a mechanism we've implemented experimentally that allows us to sync the blockchain without executing transactions, but you still have to download everything. The idea with the light client that we can just download headers and we can just rely on the fact that the difficulty of consensus is sufficient to verify the security of that. It is a weaker notion of security, of course, than like full verification of everything. But if you're assuming that the blockchain history is huge, then just by following the longest chain, the basic consensus rule, you will end up on the correct fork. And we have done quite a bit of work on that front. We have basically a library that can verify the current version of the Subspace consensus. And you can use that to build either light client like an application, or you can build a Substrate palette and build like a custom chain, or build a functionality on another Substrate-based chain that can verify Subspace consensus. So we can like send headers of Subspace there, and that side can verify that those are actually true, correct, longest headers of Substrate chain, Subspace chain. So all of that work was like the groundwork is there. We are not using it quite yet. There is still a little bit of development work to happen there, but I think we have a good progress so far. And yeah, you can expect that to be implemented fully in the future.
You there, Justin? I think you're muted.
Yep, sorry about that. So yeah, what I was saying is that, so ultimately it sounds like obviously it won't have too much of an impact on the farming side, but will be a key point and tool for developers who want to build on top of Subspace and integrate with Subspace in the various different ways that are possible.
Actually, in the future, we expect that even for farming experience, it will be an improvement, because if you read the white paper, you can see that we have this separation, and farmers are supposed to store big plots with the actual history of the blockchain, but they're not supposed to store a lot of data on the like node part. So we have like two applications. We have Subspace Node and Subspace Farmer. Farmer is supposed to store a lot of data and participate in consensus. The node is like a necessary tool to join the network, but it doesn't really do a lot of work, right? So in order to participate in consensus, you actually need to be synced to the top. And the goal of this light sync is to light client and light client sync is to actually get to the tip of the chain as quickly as possible. So that's why we need this library. We need to be able to verify the consensus of Subspace without actually running the full runtime for every single block in the history. So the idea is that instead of taking like from 30 minutes to several hours, you can actually sync to the tip within, let's say, a minute. And then you can start pulling pieces from the other farmers, because there are a lot of farmers on the network, and all of them already store the history. Like you don't need to have a node to retrieve the history. You can retrieve it from other farmers. That's how it is supposed to be. And in that sense, the sync time will be way faster. And then just like with recommitments, you will pull those pieces. You will plot them as quickly as your disk allows. But you can already farm in the meantime, like within a few minutes from when you start the software. That will be a very different, in a positive sense, experience from what we have right now.
Definitely, and that kind of segues into my next question, which was regarding the DSN. It's something I've mentioned a few times on here, but I've always mentioned it in a very ambiguous light because obviously I don't know the technical details to really fully dive into it. But it sounds like it's pretty much the other side of that puzzle. Is the light client working
Absolutely
in conjunction with the DSN?
Yeah.
Would you mind
DSN
diving?
is, of course, DSN is distributed or decentralized storage network. And what we mean by that is that farmers, in contrast to some of the other space-based consensuses, it actually stores the useful data, the history of the blockchain itself. And that means that if farmers store it, there should be a way to retrieve it. One reason to retrieve it is for other farmers to sync. That's obvious. But since that storage contains useful data of other people, it is possible to retrieve that data. So if you submit a transaction to Subspace with a picture of your cat, you should be able to have some kind of identifier, like a hash, that you can use to later retrieve that cat from Subspace DSN. And we've actually done a lot of work on that front as well. It basically builds a parallel network, just like nodes talking to each other. Farmers will also talk to each other and to nodes and in both directions, where there is a mechanism to locate by that identifier where your cat is, or like set of farmers that store your cat, and you can ask them, give me my cat, and they will give it to you. So that's like the useful and different part of our network comparing to some of the other networks, and that's why it's not just the consensus, it's also storage network. But that is like a byproduct of the consensus that we've implemented.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. I'm sure that does it a lot more justice than I have over the past few weeks. So last question that I have for, I guess, the moving forward section is, I've had a lot of community members, and we've talked a bit about it in the past, that are really hoping and we're excited to potentially see executors coming out in this version of the testnet. While we seeing executors just yet, could you maybe give us a quick update on how that executor network is going and what the community can expect in the coming months?
Absolutely. The implementation for executors, the initial one, is actually done. And on telemetry, there is a tab with Subspace XNet. There are just a few nodes there, but they are running for a while, and that's where our executors are. We've been testing that, but we expect to do some major changes to the way it functions. And we were not quite ready to open that up to the wider public. And we will still take some time to finish that up. But as soon as we are ready, we will have probably XNet 2 and maybe 3. And after that, it should become a regular part of the Gemini. Probably by Gemini 3, but we'll see.
Thank you for that explanation. So that's all I have for you from, I guess, the technical Subspace side. Next, I wanted to kind of dive into some, I guess, more personal questions with, I guess, like your personal opinions with, Subspace and where things will be going. So my first question is, what do you see as the biggest challenge that you personally will be taking on at Subspace over the next couple months into the next year?
I think the big challenge is growing the team. We are actively hiring, as mentioned before, and we have very bright folks on our team, but we need still more. And the challenge will be to find those people and to onboard them and to organize the the work of all of them to be productive and to push the technology forward. I think that is the biggest challenge that is necessary to solve in order for us to hit our planned goals and milestones.
Couldn't agree more. It was one thing I didn't expect. Like if you would have asked me when I first got brought on, if what our biggest challenge would be, I would have said, oh, it's just development. Really, it's hiring. Especially in the Web3 space, or really, I imagine any space that's on the front end of really pushing a technology. There's only so many people that are qualified for certain positions that we're looking for. So
Yeah, it's really a small world.
It definitely is. So kind of on that similar note, one thing that I really find interesting about Subspace, and granted majority of the crypto space, is the majority of us are fully remote global teams, which I don't think we've really seen before some of the crypto space started to arise like this. So what do you see as some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks of leading a truly global distributed development team?
I think there are multiple challenges related to time zones and cultural differences and just the way people used to work. And not everyone is actually comfortable or has a lot of experience working remotely. But on the other hand, we have the opportunity to have a diverse team from different culture backgrounds that can contribute to the project in very different ways. We can cover more time zones if something happens to the network, and we can also not be restricted by the part of the world where we can find the talent. We can hire the best people from all around the world, no matter where they are, no matter how they live, and really just evaluate them based on their ability to contribute to the project. And I think that is that way outweighs the drawbacks that we can potentially have from being a remote team. So yeah, I think that's a very positive thing overall.
Definitely. Yeah, it's especially back to, like, as we were just saying, with trying to already hire from a small pool of people. We can't restrict ourselves geographically to the even smaller pool. So on that same note, I think it's also kind of interesting that you are a co-founder with Jeremiah. How has it been co-founding a company with someone remotely? I think that's also something we haven't really started to see until this day and age, of where I don't think you even had met Jeremiah for quite a while there when you guys were initially coming up with that idea. Has there ever been, I'm sure there's been some challenges, but I'm sure there's also been some amazing bright sides as well. Would you care to shine a light on that at all?
Yeah, that was the first time for me to co-found the company with someone completely remotely. I don't think we have met physically for 1.5 years or something like that. It was quite a while before we were able to do that. I think the most important part is to just be on the same wavelength. As long as people are aligned in the goals and what they're doing, it's not that difficult to work remotely. And we still don't have an office, like a proper office where people come every day and work from their table. So we just set an example, I guess, or like a trend that the whole team will be probably remote forever. We might have some offices here and there, but overall, we are a distributed protocol, we are a distributed team, and we basically live our values.
That's awesome to hear. So kind of moving away from the remote work side of things, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you see for outsiders, or I guess fanatics as well, of Subspace in the upcoming years of development?
Yeah, I can say from technology point of view, I think we are building a really awesome software or project. The big part of that project is community, and the strength of our community already is amazing. So just being part of that is interesting and exciting. But I think we are trying to also reward our participants on our incentivized test networks. And yeah, I think just being part of this community, especially early on, should be should be beneficial to all of the people involved. Yeah, and definitely in terms of development, you can expect more and more things happening in the coming like months. But it's just hard to share a lot of details for you right now. But be sure they're coming.
Definitely. Awesome. So my final question for you, and I think I'm going to make this one a trend, is how do you imagine Subspace will change the world in 5 to 10 years from now?
I'm not sure I can imagine. If you look at the examples of like fundamentally new capabilities introduced by different technologies, it's usually something very different from what the original authors intended. That the thing that people actually use. And I think it might be something similar with Subspace. We have a certain thing in mind. We think that it is great for this and that use case. But there are many more creative people in the community of Subspace today and outside of the community that didn't join us yet, that may come up with something completely new that we have never thought of. And it's not hard to imagine that some of those use cases may dominate one day. I don't think when the first blockchain was invented, we could have imagined all of these like decentralized autonomous organizations and NFTs and contracts to be in widespread use today, and for like all of the governments trying to regulate it in some way because it's such a big place now. And I'm just hoping that Subspace will be one of those other important technology steps that move the humanity forward. And I think it is hard for all of us to imagine what it might look like in 5 years. It's a very fast-moving space.
Definitely. It's a good point. It's the same thing with like the internet. It'd be hard to imagine, even crypto coming along when you first saw the initial precursors of the internet coming out. So definitely a good point. Well, thank you, Nazar. That was all of the questions I had for you coming along today. I don't think we have any questions in the chat.
Two basic questions that I saw, Nazar, that you can answer quickly that I've seen a few times and again today. People just asking the general question, and Justin, you talked about too, about just reusing the same wallet when they're farming and if they can use the same wallet. I've been asked that a few times. So maybe just touch on that. I know the answer is yes, but if you could just go ahead and talk about that. Maybe Justin, you can.
I guess I can take that one.
For farming rewards.
Generally, the way we track who gets reward is by reward address. That's why it's called that way. And if you participated in a previous stress test or you participated in Gemini 1, ideally all of those reward addresses that you have used will be the same, such that in the future we can link those together. And when we are deciding whether you are eligible for the potential community sale, that will be the way we are tracking all of that. So if you have access to your wallet, I hope you are. If you don't have a backup, please do it right now and store it in a safe place. So yes, we definitely encourage you to use the same wallet across all of the different versions of our networks and keep it safe at all times.
Justin, you have any closing comments? I think there's a few other things you wanted to mention before we close out, but fascinating conversation, you guys. Thanks again to Nazar for joining us today.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly mention on the localization front, we have added Ukrainian, Turkish, and Vietnamese. So if you speak any of those languages, we would definitely love to see your help translating for our main website. If you look into the office hours chat, you should see the link for that coming through here shortly. And that's just through our translation portal. It'll simply pop up with what the word is and what to and a spot for you to translate it. We definitely appreciate all contributions there. And beyond that, just a quick update on the community moderator side. We have selected about 14 community moderators who will be becoming moderators in the global channels. So if you do see those start to pop up, just be prepared for that, and they will hopefully start helping support those various global channels as well. And beyond that, just our focus for the next few weeks will be stress test. So, if you have any questions, we're always here to help. Pass it back over to you, Todd.
Yeah, this has been great, you guys. Thank you so much for this. Hopefully everybody got as much out of this as I did. It's always great to hear Nazar's insights. And in the future, I know Justin will be announcing some future guests that we plan to have on office hours. So be sure to check the announcements in advance to see who's going to join us. We have a lot of exciting things coming. The team is growing. We're approaching just about 30 people at this point, considering we were, at about a very small fraction of that, probably 10% of that a year and a half ago. We've come a long way. So thank you again for joining us. And just to reiterate, obviously, we're looking for help, as Justin had said, translating for Vietnamese and Turkish channels. We have our stress test support available in Discord or the forums, which is where we prefer. You'll see a lot of common questions answered there. And again, one quick shout out to Subwallet, who since late August has been supporting the Subspace network. So Subwallet is a plugin you can get to run your Substrate wallet that supports our network. So definitely check out Subwallet if you have not. And with that, just again, a thank you to Nazar and to everybody else for joining. Thank you. And as Nazar said, community is what we're all about. I've heard that called really the layer zero in Web3. It is about the community. That is the most important part. We appreciate you all taking the time to join us, and we will be back again in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.